I will say good morning. It is a tremendous zechus to be able to learn with you today. Although we are geographically distant, it is a great zechus to be able to be brought together virtually. A very special thank you to Rabbi Richter, to Rabbi Malevsky, to Josh Erez, to all of those who were giving the shiurim over the last couple of days. A thank you to Maishi Abramson, to Jeremy Lassen for enabling me to be able to learn with you even when I am geographically distant. Beginning by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's shir, to thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, Tilson Family, Yisrael, for dedicating all of your Shem Drashos this year in the zechus of Besoros Tovos for Am Yisroel. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tamuz, the Weinberg Mishpacha, thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for His Nissim, both revealed and hidden, for Yonatan Shai Weinberg for 14 years ago, and for Erertz Hashem continued Besoros Tovos and the arrival of moshiach in Rabbi Aminu. Daniel Batsheva Pava of Yahrzeit Yisrael, Le'ilui Nishmas, Reb Shlomo ben Yosef Aryeh Vegh. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Jacob and Julie Blumenfeld, the Ilui Nishmas, Jacob's grandmother, Hannah Bas Mordechai, Jean Goldman, and Paul and Kathy Pollack, in honor of the birth of a great-grandson to Harold and Elaine Shindel, to their children Avram, to their children Avram and Ahuva Jaffe of Yerushalayim Ira Kodesh. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and a great source. Thank you for helping to support Talmud Torah within our Kehillah, and Erertz Hashem for our greater Daf Yomi Chevra. So also with that, let us begin. We have incredible Daf ahead of us today. Today's Daf is Daf Chof 20. We are picking up at the Mishnah on Yud Tes Amud Beis and 19b. So continuing in the theme of Avoda Zara, some really incredible Gemara ahead of us. Actually today, some really dramatic Gemara. The Mishnah says as follows: Ve'ein osin tachshitin la'avodas kochavim. You can't make any type of ornaments, literally translated like jewelry. Can't make any type of ornaments or jewelry for Avoda Zara. Examples: katlos. Katlos is a choker. Nizamim, tabaos, nose rings, other rings. Rabbi Eliezer Omer b'schar muter. Rabbi Eliezer says this is only true if you're doing it of your own volition. But if you're being paid to do it, let's say you're a hired craftsman, then again, halacha l'maaseh says you're allowed to go ahead and do it. Obviously, as I mentioned, last week, feels like a million years ago, but last week, we have to get into a lot of the halachas, a lot of the halacha l'maaseh concerning how we actually deal with these contemporary issues of Avoda Zara, which in Erertz Hashem we will get to in the coming weeks, coming days. So again, Tanakama says you can't go ahead and make any type of ornamental things for Avoda Zara. Rabbi Eliezer says if you're getting paid for it, it's mutter. Ein mocher lahem b'mocher lekarka, aval mocher moshiach. This is another interesting halacha. You are not allowed to sell an akum, anything that is attached to the ground. Now we'll discuss exactly why this is. This is actually going to be the first topic in the Gemara. So literally translated, you can't sell them anything that is attached to the ground, okay? Aval mocher hu moshiach, but you can sell them something that was attached to the ground as long as it was detached. Okay, Sarachian, what exactly does this mean? What's the nature of this prohibition to be determined? Rabbi Yehuda says, Mocherhu al menas lakos. Rabbi Yehuda says you could even sell it on the condition to sell it. To cut it down. So an interesting machlokes here, sounds like the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda is as follows. Rabbi Yehuda says, you can't sell an akum anything that is attached to the ground, period. The only time you could sell them something that is attached to the ground is if it was detached. Now, of course, once it's been detached, it's no longer attached. Rabbi Yehuda argues, Rabbi Yehuda says, you could sell them something that is attached as long as it is clear that the intention is to detach it. Okay, like I said, further, we're going to see further clarification of this in the Gemara itself. Incredible. So it says the Gemara, Minhani Mili. So the Gemara is jumping here right into this statement of that you're not allowed to sell an akum something that is mechuber lekarka. So I can't sell an akum anything that's attached to the ground. So the Gemara says, what is that? What is that? So first of all, understand what this would mean, right? This would mean, again, a tree, vines, a house, pretty much, again, anything that is attached to the ground. So the Gemara says, what is this? And now, I just want to point out, this is a din in Erertz Yisrael. So in Erertz Yisrael, you can't sell an akum anything that is attached to the ground. So the Gemara says, Menhani Mili, from where do you know this? Am Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, tap of Chofta Amar Kra, lo sichanim. So the pasuk says, lo sichanim. What does lo sichanim mean? It says, the Gemara, lo sitein lahem chania bekarka. You cannot give an akum a foothold in the land of Israel. Erertz Yisrael was given to Am Yisroel. We have one land in this entire world, one land that is only solely and fully ours. And therefore, again, the Gemara says, Chash Baruch Hu says, Lo Sechanim, don't give up a portion of that land to the Akum. Don't give up a portion of that land to anyone else outside of Klal Yisrael. So again, I want to point out, we're going to see this pasuk, this phrase, is going to be subject to some level of dispute. The pasuk in its entirety reads as follows, in the beginning of Chumash Devarim, Unisanam Hashem Elokecha lefanecha v'kisam. So this is talking about Klal Yisrael's conquest over the 7 nations who resided in Canaan. So when you're coming to Canaan, you're going to do war against all of these nations, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to deliver them into your hands. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is promising us victory. So hacharim tacharim osam. So you have to obliterate them. Now again, they could leave, but you have to obliterate them. They have to leave, right? Lo sichros lahem bris. Do not establish with them a covenant. Velo sichaneim. That's that race. So again, the context, you're going to come into Eretz Yisrael, you're going to conquer all of the nations who are there. Do not create treaties with them. Do not go ahead and, right, and lo sechaneim. So what does lo sechaneim mean? So again, here the Gemara says lo sechaneim, lo sitein lahem chaniya bekarka. Don't give them a portion of the land. And therefore, again, referencing back to the Mishnah, therefore the Mishnah says, in Eretz Yisrael, you are not allowed to sell an akum, anything that is attached to the ground. Why? Biblical prohibition, lo sechaneim. Incredible. Now, I want to point out also something interesting. If you notice, in general, before Maseches Avoda Zara, an akum pretty much referred to anyone who is not Jewish, with the exception of a ger toshav, who is a Noachide, right? But then in Avodah Zarah in the beginning, we kind of constricted that focus a little bit to Avodah Zarah. An akum is literally someone who worships Avodah Zarah. Now we're globalizing a little bit more. That akum means anyone outside of Am Yisroel. So anyone outside of Am Yisroel, you can't sell them a portion of Eretz Yisrael. Once the Gemara says, 1 second. Second line down, we'll say from Anchaf Amud Aleph, Hai lo sichanim miboile, dachikam rachmana. But 1 second. That lo sichanim is here to teach us a different halacha. What's the different halacha? Lo sitein lahem chein. Literally, again, don't give them chein. Now, chein usually means like a charm or a kindness. What does this mean? Like you say, like a person has chein. Don't give them chein. Says Rashi, Tab Rashi, first line, Shelo Yomar Kama Avodas Kochavim Ze Avikcham Zena. Don't compliment them. It's interesting, right? So Lo Sechanim from Lashon of Chein, don't compliment the akum. Don't compliment the akum. Okay, you say to yourself, I don't know, compliments are nice and compliments are easy, and isn't it? So again, the Ribono Shel Olam is seeking to create a certain level of distance between Am Yisroel and the nations of the world. There has to be collaboration, there has to be certain levels of partnerships, but ultimately to serve certain greater needs. But Baruch Hu also understood that there has to be division and there has to be walls. So lo sichanim, therefore second approach means don't compliment them, you don't need to ingratiate yourself to them. So the Gemara says, Im ki makra lo sichunam. So the Gemara said, if that's the case, then I should have said lo sichunam. My lo sichanim. Why lo sichanim? So again, if it was just about do not give them chein, then the proper way to write that would have been lo sichunam. Why does it say lo sichanim? Shmamina karti. 2 halachas. So again, actually we could learn that both. So lo sichanim means, number 1, do not give them chaniya, not just parking, right? But don't give them literally again a foothold in land. Don't give them parts of the land. And number 2, don't give compliments. Don't give compliments to the akum. Ay vakat mi boile tachim rachmano lo sitin lahem matnas shalchinam. But there's another interpretation. The other interpretation is don't give them free gifts. Don't give them free gifts. In other words, free gifts is something that Jews do to one another. But that level of friendship, that level of responsibility, that level of love, that's reserved for one Jew to the other. When it comes to the akum, do not give him 3 gifts. So again, here, lo sechanim is lashon of chinam, free. The Gemara says, Im ki makra lo sechinem. Then it should have said lo sechinem. My lo sechanim shma mina kulhu. Why does it write in the form lo sechanim? Because lo sechanim, that form of the word, teaches me all 3 of these halachas. So from one phrase or from one prohibition of lo sechanim, we learn 3 things. Number 1, working backwards. Number 1, do not give free gifts to the akum. Number 2, do not give compliments to the akum. Those 2 really are interrelated. Because all that Hashem Baruch Hu is saying is, okay, there has to be collaboration, there has to be partnerships in certain things, but there need not be, or there should not be a close relationship. There needs to be a little bit of a distance. Lo sechanim, don't give compliments, don't give free gifts. Then there's the third halacha. The third halacha, also the same derivative, lo sechanim, lo sitem lahem chania bekarka. Don't give them a foothold in the land. Don't sell them, and certainly don't gift them parts of Erertz Yisrael. And again, all three of these halachas learned out from the same word. Timing on Mehachi Abrayis that supports this. Lo sechanim, lo sitem lahem chania bekarka. What does lo sechanim mean? Don't give them a portion of Erertz Yisrael. Davar achar, lo sechanim, lo sitem lahem chen. Literally, again, don't compliment them. Davar achar, another possibility, lo sechanim, lo sitem lahem matnas chinam. Don't give them a free gift. So the Gemara says, one second, the matnas chinam gufei tanahi. Now the truth is, this whole idea about a free gift to an akum, so this is like a free, unsolicited. This is a machlokes tanaim. The sanyo. Lo sochlu kol nevela. So this is interesting halacha. So Torah says as follows: you're not allowed to eat nevela. Nevela is an animal that dies without proper shechita. What's the halacha? So lager asher b'sharecha tetnana v'achala. Give it to the ger who resides in your gates. Now, generally, ger in that type of context, ger means a ger toshav, which is again a non-Jew who has repudiated idolatry, follows the seven mitzvos b'nei Noach, and again we have an obligation to sustain an obligation to make him part of community. Now, obviously, he's not bound by the laws of kashrus. He's not Jewish, so he doesn't have the 613 mitzvahs. He just has the seven mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So the Torah says as follows: if you have an nevela, what should you do with it? Lager asher b'sherecha tetnana, give it to the ger who resides in your gates. V'yachlan, you can eat it. Or machor lenachri, or sell it to the nachri, sell it to the guy, sell it to the Gentile who lives, the nachri who lives within your, or in your surroundings. So Gemara says something very interesting. If you look at the Torah, says something very interesting. It tells us you could gift it to the ger, or you could sell it to the nachri. So the Gemara says, I only know that these are the two options at my disposal. The Gemara says, how do I know? Right? How do I know that I'm also allowed to sell it to the ger? How do I know that? So the Gemara says, titnana ol machor. So the Gemara kind of shifts the comma a little bit and makes titnana ol machor one phrase. You can either gift it or you could sell it. You could sell it. So therefore, again, to the ger, you could gift it to the ger, or you could sell it to the ger. And how do I know that I'm also allowed to gift it to the akum? Again, once again, we shift around the punctuation a little bit. It says, give it to him and he will eat it, or you could sell it. So essentially, again, what we're doing over here is we're using that phrase, titnena omachar, to be a modifier both on ger and nachri, both on ger and nachri, to teach me. First opinion says nimtza ata omer echad ger ve'echad ovei kochavim bein menesina bein mecher de Rabbi Meir. So we'll say this is Rabbi Meir's shita. Rabbi Meir says, since Torah's telling me two things. Number one, can't eat nevela. Okay. Number two, don't just throw it out. Give it away. Give it away. So what are your options? You could gift it or you could sell it. And who can you gift it or sell it to? Either to a ger or to a nachri. All options are on the table. So you could gift it to a ger, you could sell it to a ger, you could gift it to a nachri, you could give it to a nachri. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda says no. So we'll say, so according to Rabbi Meir, it's very interesting. According to Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to give a gift to a nachri. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and he says, no, dvarim kichsavan, not true. The pasuk is actually explicit and specific. Lager b'nesina ula ovei kochav b'mechira. No, dafka, here are your options. When you have an avela, so again, you can't eat it. So what can I do with it? One of two options. Either give it to the ger or sell it to the akum. Those are the options at your disposal. No other options. Shaper kam Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda. But one second. What about the fact that Rabbi Meir darshan the pasuk so beautifully to teach me that I have both of these options by both of these people? Rabbi Yehuda will say no. Rabbi Meir, if you are right, that either you have the right to gift or to sell to either the nachri or the ger, it should have said lichtov rachmana titnena va'achala umachar. The pasuk should have said, give it, he will eat it, and sell it. O lamali. Why do I need the word o machar? Why do I need the word o or? That's teaching me Lidvarim Kichsavan Huda Asa. That O, that word or, teaches me there are two tracks over here. There are two tracks. There's a ger track and there's a nachri track. On the ger track, you can sell to the ger. You don't have to gift it to him, but you can gift it to him. But for the nachri, there's only one option. O machar, you can sell it to him. You can't gift it to the nachri. Rabbi Meir, what does Rabbi Meir do with the O? He says, Rabbi Meir says ultimately again, no, the O is important because the O establishes precedence. Because even though again, I can either gift or sell to the ger, or gift or sell to the nachri, but again, at the end of the day, if I'm going to sell, better to sell to the ger than to sell to the nachri. Rabbi Yehuda says that's obvious. Kevan the ger atamutzu v'lachioso ukinani iatamutzu v'lachioso. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Rabbi Meir said, if there's a choice between gifting it to the ger and selling it to the nachri, gift it to the ger. Gift it to the ger, assuming you don't need the money, right? Gift it to the ger. And Rabbi Yehuda says that's obvious. Kevan the ger atamutzu v'lachioso ukinani iatamutzu v'lachioso lahaktim lo tzarech kra. Rabbi Yehuda says that's obvious. I being the Jewish community, has a responsibility towards the ger toshav. He's part of the community. I have an obligation to support him, right? If he needs support. The nachri, I don't. So obviously, again, there's going to be precedence to giving to the ger over selling to the nachri. So we'll say, if we bring this all together, what we have as follows. So fundamental machlokas, in general, in terms of whether or not you're allowed to give a matnas chinam, a gift to a nachri. Machlokas Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. So ultimately, again, Rabbi Meir holds that halacha l'maisa, Torah tells me I can either gift or sell to both a ger or to a nachri. So what does the pasuk come to teach me? At the end of the day, ideally, best to gift to the ger over selling to the nachri. Rabbi Yehuda says, absolutely not. Devarim kichsavan. The halacha is as it's stated in the Torah. If you have an Avoda, you can't eat it. So what do you do with it? Here are your options. You can gift it to a nachri, you can gift it to a ger toshav, or you can sell it to a nachri. But you cannot gift it to a nachri. So I will say, so remember again, this machlokes is tied into the previous discussion. What was the previous discussion? Lo sichanem. What does that prohibition mean? So the Gemara gave three opinions. Number one, do not give a free gift to a nachri. So obviously, that interpretation works with Rabbi Yehuda, does not work with Rabbi Meir. Which is how you know we pass like Rabbi Yehuda, Devarim Kichsavan. So if you have an Avela, your options are as follows. You can gift it to a ger. You could also sell it to a ger, or you can gift it to, or you could sell it to a nachri. But you may not gift it to a nachri. That's why we paskin again. So that's why in interpretation number 3 of Lo Sechanem, which we'll now state as number 1, was you can't give a free gift to a nachri. That's number 1. Lo Sechanem also teaches me number 2, Lo Sitem Chen. You can't give unsolicited compliments to the nachri. Right? All of this to create a certain level of distance between the Jew and the nachri and the akum. And number 3, which is again our Mishnah, Lo Sechanem Lo Sitem Chania Bekarka. You cannot give an akum portions of Erertz Yisrael. As one could imagine, this whole discussion of Lo Sechanem and the greater discussion of land for peace is obviously is a topic upon which much rabbinic ink has been spilled over the years. Again, not our topic for today, but just interesting to see that Midoraisa HaKadosh Baruch Hu says Lo Sechanem Erertz Yisrael is for Am Yisroel. Do not give portions of it to the akum. Okay, incredible. So we'll say, so that's takeaway number 1. So that's what the Mishnah said. You can't sell a nachri anything that is mechuber lekarka, anything that is attached to the ground. Why? Lo sechanem. 3 interpretations of Lo sechanem. In Machlokes Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. Incredible. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara, Davar acher Lo sechanem Lo sitin lechein. So we'll say, remember again, I think I was going to go through the interpretation. So what does it say? Lo sechanem. Don't give an unsolicited compliment. Don't give a compliment. So this supports Rav. What did Rav say? The Amar Rav, that a person shouldn't say how beautiful this Avoda Zara is. You shouldn't compliment it. In other words, let's say you go to a house of worship that's not that's idolatry, and it's beautiful. The architecture is beautiful. This is beautiful. Then a Jew's not supposed to compliment Avoda Zara. Meisvei. So Gemara is the kasha. So So we'll say, so again, there was a story of Reb Shimon Gamliel who was on literally, again, the steps going up to Harabayas. Just incredible. V'ra'a, and I will say this is an incredible, incredible Gemara. V'ra'a ovedes kochavim achas na'abi Yosef. This is an incredible Gemara. Shimon Gamliel is going up the steps of Harabayas. Halabai, we should all be zochem Hashem bekarov. And what happens? As he's coming there, he sees a beautiful woman, an avodas kochavim, an idolatress. And what happens? Beautiful woman. Amar marabu ma'asecha Hashem. This is wild. And he sees this beautiful woman and he says, Kadosh Baruch Hu, look how great your creations are. Marabu ma'asecha Hashem. Look how beautiful your creations are. Okay, the Gemara says, good. So again, on both sides. So interestingly enough, the Gemara, just want to point out, the Gemara is bringing this story as a kasha ultimately again on the statement that was just made. Because what was the statement that was made? You're not allowed to compliment idolatry. So the Gemara is raising this kasha, bringing this story as Rabbi Shimon Gamliel complimenting idolatry. Now the truth is, the Gemara is then going to go on a different segue about just in general, this is a woman, right? This Reb Shimon Gamliel is complimenting a woman who's not his wife. What about like the morality concept of that? We'll get to that. But right now, the discussion over here is the Gemara just said, Lo sichanem, lo sitem l'chein. Do not give unsolicited compliments. Reb Shimon Gamliel is going up the steps of Harabayas. He sees this beautiful idolatress. He says, Marabu ma'asak Kadosh Baruch Hu, look at your beautiful creations. Okay, another story. Vaf Rabbi Akiva, Ra'a Eshes Turnus Rufus Harasha. Rabbi Akiva saw the wife of Turnus Rufus, Turnus Rufus was known as the butcher of the Jews. Maseches Gittin discusses all of the blood that Turnus Rufus spilled during the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. And what happened? Rabbi Akiva saw his wife. Rabbi Akiva saw Turnus Rufus, his wife. Rak sachak ubacha. He spit, he laughed, and he cried. Ra shahaisa ba'ameti pasrucha. Rak, say spit. Why? Because she came from a putrid drop. And I will say, now that wasn't unique to her, right? Now the Gemara discusses, she was an exceptionally beautiful woman. And Rabbi Akiva spit because the Gemara says, like a Kavi B'Mahalal says in the Mishnah, that we know we all come from Tipa Sucha. We all come from a drop, from a putrid drop. That's how life begins. And even though she was so beautiful, she came from this quote-unquote putrid drop. So that's why he spit, representing the putrid drop. Sachak, he laughed. Why? The asida de megaira v'nosivla, because he saw prophetically, this is incredible, that one day the wife of Turnus Rufus was going to convert, and Rabbi Akiva and her were going to get married. They were going to get married. So the Gemara says, v'nosivla bacha. And why did he cry? Shufra bali afra, because one day this woman who was so beautiful, this beautiful form, would decompose ultimately in the dirt. So Shabbos, incredible. Now, V'rav. Now we'll say, so again, so interestingly enough, so there's a lot to unpack in these stories over here, but again, how could it be, let's go back to Reb Shlomo Gamliel, how could Reb Shlomo Gamliel was complimenting this beautiful woman who he saw again on the stairs of the Harabayas? Isn't that complimenting idolatry? And isn't that usher? To which the Gemara said, Rav said, no. Adu Yehuda kamod. No, he wasn't complimenting her. Who was he complimenting? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's going on? Again, he says, Marabu ma'asecha Hashem. He sees this one who's exceptionally beautiful. She's an idolatress. Kadosh Baruch Hu. You are the master creator. You create beautiful things in this world. So Mar says, Da'amar Mar, Harold Besoros Tovos, Omer Baruch Shekacha Bara Ba'olamo. Because again, there's a halacha, it's both Maseches Brachas, that if you see beautiful people, if you see Besoros Tovos, and not just beautiful people, you see magnificent creations. So what's the halacha? You say, Baruch Shekacha Bara Ba'olamo. Blessed are you, Hashem, who has created such beautiful things in your world. Okay, so we'll say, so fine. So therefore, what comes out of it here is the halacha as espoused is still intact, meaning that halacha l'maisa, we have to go ahead and halacha l'maisa, you're not allowed to give an unsolicited compliment to an akum, right? That's lo sichanem. With Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, he wasn't complimenting the akum. He was complimenting the Ribono Shel Olam. That's what was happening over here. All right, incredible. Now the Gemara says, 1 second. Can we talk about these stories for just a moment? About Reb Shlomo and Rabbi Akiva. Are you allowed to look at women who aren't your wife? And the Gemara just asks a simple question, right? Reb Shlomo is so enthralled by the beauty of this idolatress that he says a bracha over her, right? Literally again, a pasuk, marabu ma'asecha Hashem. Incredible. Rabbi Akiva, wife of Turnus Rufus. Okay, so prophetically, but 1 second, the Gemara says, hold up here just for a second. Are you allowed to look at women who are not your wife? So it says the Gemara, Meisvei, Gemara is the kasha, V'nishmarta midavara. So pasuk says, you shall guard yourself from every evil thing. Shalo yistakil adam bi'isha na'eh v'afilu pnuya. A man, so what does it mean? V'nishmarta mikol davara literally means save yourself from getting into trouble. So how does a man save himself from getting into trouble? Don't look at other beautiful women who are not your wife. Don't do that. It's only going to lead to one thing. It's only going to have some type of here's what's clear. It's certainly not going to lead to something good, right? No one ever gazed at other women who are not his wife and said, oh, you know what, Baruch Hashem, I did that. That was just the pathway to so much ridiculous spiritual growth, right? That's never happened in the history of humanity. So whatever the negative thing is going to happen, that may vary in degrees. But clearly one thing is true, which is it's not going to lead to anything positive. So therefore, I want to just point out over here, and we're going to see this theme. The lashon of v'nishmarta, the shamar, means to engage in anticipatory behavior. Now, where do we know this from? So remember again, when Yosef has his dreams, right? So the brothers get all upset at the dreams, and the pasuk says, "Va'aviv shamar es hadavar." That Yaakov Avinu literally again shamar, he guarded the matter. And Rashi HaKodesh says, what does it mean shamar? Yosef umitzape masai yavo. Yaakov Avinu knew the dreams were going to come true. Shamar means to anticipatorily wait for something to come to fruition. So therefore, again, v'nishmarta mikol davara means be an anticipatory type of person. Be roa as hanolad. All of us know the things and the influences which are going to lead us down a bad path. So be proactive. Be proactive. I will say we so often live life in defense mode. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells us, go on the offense. Go on the offense. V'nishmarta mikol davara means offensively protect yourself. Be on the offense. Offensively protect yourself from the things that you know are going to lead you down the wrong path. And therefore the Gemara says, don't look at a beautiful woman who's not your wife, afilu pnuya, even if she's single. The Gemara says, eishes ish, if she's married, afilu mechuras, even if she's not beautiful. In other words, for a married woman, one should never look at another married woman. But even a single woman, if she's beautiful, and obviously a definition of beautiful, okay, that's a subjective definition, right? But even if she's right beautiful, don't look at her. Why? I'm not doing anything. Right now you're not doing anything. But Lemaisa, is it going to lead to anything good? Is it going to lead to anything productive? Chances are it's only going to lead to something negative. Therefore, the nishmarta mikol davara means live life on the spiritual offense. Don't live on the spiritual defense. Live on the offense. Yoshef umitzape. Anticipate what are the things that are going to get me into trouble and lead me down a wrong path, and avoid those things mitchilas. Yeah, the Gemara says specifically about looking at other women Amadeus. Not only that, don't look ultimately again at the colored clothing of a woman. Rashi says, now again, colored clothing are like more not seductive is the wrong word, but more beautiful. So a person shouldn't look at the colored clothing of a woman, because again, when he looks at those clothing, he's gonna think about that woman, again, perhaps in a immoral or erotic type of fashion. Furthermore, not only that, you shouldn't really even look at animals mating, right? Donkey and donkess, whatever the female donkey is, right? The chazer and the chazira, even birds at the time that they're mating, niskakin zelazeh, don't look. Again, I will say, what's the pshat? You say to yourself, what? Again, when it comes to matters of morality, I will say, we are very fragile beings. And one of the things that we are most pulled towards is immorality. That's just the nature of man. We are pulled towards immorality. And the truth is, we know this. If we're honest with ourselves, all it takes is the smallest trigger. And already, again, my head is like in the wrong place, and my eyes are in the wrong place, and my thoughts are in the wrong place. So therefore, again, it's incredible. The pasuk says, "V'nishmarta, unishmarta mikol davara." Right. So that pasuk, "V'nishmarta mikol davara," ultimately, again, is be on the offense. Now, by the way, I want to point out, I didn't mention this before. The pasuk is "Kiseitze machane Aryeh Vegh." When the camp goes out to war against your enemy, v'nishmarta mikol davara. So obviously, the Torah is talking about heightened vigilance during war. You know, it's interesting. The Sfarim write that whenever the Torah says "oyev," your enemy, it's always a reference to Zara. So when the pasuk says "Kiseitze machane Aryeh Vegh," if you want to mobilize your personalistic army against your Zara, what's the secret to success in the war against the Zara? V'nishmarta mikol davara. The secret to success in the war against the Zara is not a good defense. It's a good offense. It's a good offense. It's at the end of the day, take the battle to the Zara. Be on the offense. V'nishmarta mikol davara. If to begin with, I just avoid getting myself in the negative situations, we're going to see that theme over and over. If I can, I know what the triggers are. I know the things that set me off. I know the things that lead me down a wrong path. I know it. It's not like I know myself. I know the things that if I look at this and if I do this, it's going to set off a whole chain reaction of events. Okay, so don't look. Try my best again to avoid things proactively, offensively. Therefore, again, the Gemara says, don't even look at the animals mating. You're going to say, oh, come on. If the animal's mating, what is that going to do? I don't know what it's going to do, but why put yourself in that situation? So the Gemara says, listen to this. Right? Even if you're filled with eyes like the angel of death. Now we'll discuss that reference in just a moment. The Gemara says, but it's so hard not to look. In other words, the Malach HaMavos are going to see as eyes everywhere. We'll discuss what that means. Because Malach HaMavos shekula malei einayim. Because again, now the Gemara digresses here for just a second. The angel of death is covered in eyes. Malei einayim. Now what's the pshat that the Malach HaMavos is covered in eyes? And I will say, perhaps the simple pshat is that when we live, when we're alive, so there's a lot of things that we do that we choose not to see, or we choose to ignore, or we choose to kind of bury. And that's fine. You can go through life like that, as long as we understand that at the time that we die and at the time that we leave this world, at the end of the day, everything is seen. There is nothing that can be hidden. Everything is seen. Everything is revealed. The Malach HaMavos literally sees everything. He's covered in eyes. And again, I will say, at the end of the day, after 120, we have to give an accounting for everything in life. Even the things that we chose to ignore, even the things that we tried to bury, or the things that we tried to hide, we still have to give an accounting for them. The Gemara says as follows: So again, at a time that a person is very ill and they're about to die, the Malach HaMavos is standing there on the head, on top of the ill person. The charba shlufa biyado, and his sword is outstretched in his hand. The tipa shamara teluyabo, and there's a little bit of poison on the edge of the sword. Kivan shechola ra oso. So this is pretty wild. Apparently, when the person is ill and about to die, so they see the Malach HaMavos. That is, one could imagine a very startling vision. Their mouth opens, mizdazeo poseach piv. So they see the Malach HaMavos. Is incredible. This is describing death. Then the moments before you die, you see the Malach HaMavos. Again, it's an overwhelming sight. Therefore, again, the mouth, Chola opens up his mouth. Poseach piv, vizarka l'soch piv, and a little bit of poison on the edge of the sword of the Malach HaMavos falls into the mouth of the person who is ill. Mimena meis. That's how you die. That's how you die, from the poison on the sword of the Malach HaMavos. That's what creates death. Mimena nisrach. Masriach, that's how the body decomposes. Mimena ponav marikos, that's how the face becomes a little bit like more sunken. So fine. So we'll come back to Malach HaMavos in just a little bit. So I'll say now full circle. Remember again, why do you get into this? How is Reb Shimon Gamliel complimenting this idolatress, right? Remember again, he's standing on the stairs of the Har HaBayis. Isn't this incredible? He sees this beautiful idolatress. He says, Marabu Masach Hashem. So fine. So we said it's not complimenting idolatry because he wasn't complimenting idolatry, he was complimenting Kadosh Baruch Hu. Fine. But he was still complimenting another woman. How could he have done that? To which the Gemara answers, Karen Zavis Havi. To which the Gemara answers, it was a corner. He rounded a corner. In other words, he didn't intentionally look at her. Instead, what ended up happening over here is he was coming around one corner, she was coming around the other corner, and therefore he couldn't anticipate, and he saw her. He saw her. So again, not that it was, in other words, there was no way he could have avoided it. So once he saw her, he obviously saw her tremendous beauty, and he complimented her to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Incredible. Rashi says, Karen Zavis, Kishapon Liyamin, all the small ikanis, mi mavoy lamavoy, pogin zed zed be Karen Zavis. So he didn't have a chance to close his eyes. So because he didn't have a chance to close his eyes, therefore halacha l'maisa, he saw her. But in general, in achinami, one would not be able to intentionally look at another woman, even if it's for the purposes of praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Incredible, Basai. Incredible. So a lot more to say on this. Come on, but let's go back to Now the other thing the Braisa said was, again, in this v'nishmarta mikol davara, in being on the spiritual offense and not looking at things that could potentially elicit inappropriate desires or wants. So the other thing is you can't look at the colored garments of a woman. So Am Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, even if like they're out on the clothesline, the dry, you still can't look at it. Amra Papa, Papa says that's only if you know who the clothing belongs to. In other words, you go into a store and you see clothing, okay, but you can't, in other words, this idea that clothing could elicit inappropriate thoughts is only when you know who the clothing belongs to. So the Gemara says, Amrava dekanami diktani velo bebigdate sava isha velo katani velo bebigdate sivonin. Because it's interesting, even the way it's written, it says, and you should not look at the colored clothing of a woman, which seems to indicate that you know who the woman is. That's what could elicit thoughts. But stam clothing is not a problem. Shmami no. So the Gemara says, Amr of Chista, Hanini Atiki. Furthermore, this is only with old clothing, obviously. Less lanba. But with new clothing, in other words, it's only talking about clothing that someone's worn, right? But let's say, again, a woman purchased a particular piece of clothing, but she hasn't worn it yet. There's no prohibition for another man to look at that because even though she owns it, she hasn't worn it. So therefore, looking at it will not create any illicit thoughts. Because if you don't say this, so the Gemara says, Anan manalit la'afshure hechiya binale, how can you ever go ahead, let's say, and give if a woman purchases an article of clothing, let's say she needs alterations, how could she ever bring it to the tailor if the tailor's going to look at it and have inappropriate thoughts? Well, the Tamech, the Gemara says, 1 second, Had Amar Yehuda min b'mina muter lehachnis kimachal b'shvaferes. Shabbos, the Gemara says something very interesting over here. The Gemara says, now let's say again, I'm a farmer or a shepherd, I have animals, and I need to help my animals mate. So the halakha is actually, one is permitted to help his animals mate. A shepherd, a farmer is allowed to help his animals mate. I think we're saying, how can you do that? We just said before, how come is stakel? But you're going to be looking at the mating. We just said that that's a problem. To which the Gemara says, Ella ba'avidite tarid. Here's the difference. If I'm the farmer and I'm helping my animals mate, that's not going to elicit any inappropriate thoughts. Why not? Gemara says, ba'avidite tarid. I'm working. The assumption is very interesting. When a person is engaged in their work, so therefore, again, the actions they have to do for their work are not going to elicit any type of immoral thoughts. So if I'm going to go ahead, if I'm the shepherd and I have to go ahead and get my flock together, I need them to mate, helping the male and the female is not going to elicit any negative, because that's my work. I'm involved, my head is in my work, and therefore, again, when my head is in my work, I'm not, my thoughts are not going elsewhere. So to the Gemara says over here, by the craftsman also, the truth is, even if the woman had worn the clothing before, it doesn't really matter for him, because halacha l'maisa, it is only a din ultimately in someone who's not involved in his work. But the craftsman could work even on an article of clothing that a woman had worn before, because since it's his work, therefore his mind is focused on his work. So I will say it's actually quite a beautiful Gemara, that this idea of ba'avidit tarid. So the Gemara says, when a person is tarid, when a person is occupied with their work, they don't have time for immoral thoughts. They're focused. And I will say, what a profound yisod in our spiritual growth as well. The whole avoda in life is ba'avidet tarid. Be busy. Be busy. When a person is tarid, when a person is occupied in avoda, in work, and again, my time is scheduled, I'm working, I know that I'm becoming accomplished, there's much less time to get yourself into trouble. We all know, when do I get into trouble in life? During unstructured periods of time. when I am torrid in avoda, when my life is constructively scheduled. I keep going back to this. When I'm occupied, when I know, and again, it doesn't mean I'm always working. A person could be on vacation, a person could be away, but even on vacation, there's a structure, there's what I'm doing, there's how I'm doing it, there's an avoda. It's purposeful. When my life is purposeful, and therefore, again, I am constantly engaged in avodas Hashem, I am tarid ba'avoda, I'm occupied with growth, I'm occupied with service. My life is filled with meaning. No matter what it is that I am doing, then halacha l'maisa, there's no time for the Yetzer Hara. It's fascinating, right? The craftsman doesn't have time to think immoral thoughts. He's fixing the garment. The shepherd doesn't have time for immoral thoughts. He's got to grow the flock. The Yid has no time for immoral thoughts when? Ba'avidita tarid. When I am occupied with avoda. When I am occupied in purposeful, meaningful, directed living, there's no time for anything else. Incredible. Amr Mar, both says just do one more piece. Amr Mar. So remember again, the Gemara said that how does a person die? Because the Malach HaMavis comes, he has a little bit of poison on his sword. A person sees the Malach HaMavis the moments before death, his mouth opens up, the poison falls in, and that's it, he dies. So the Gemara says, name of the Pligad Avoda Shmuel. They seem to argue on the father of Shmuel. The Amar Avoda Shmuel, Amar li Malach HaMavis, listen to this. The Malach HaMavis says as follows, I lo dechayshina liyikra debrisa, had I not been concerned for the covet of people, I would rip open their throat like shchita. So the Gemara says, so it's a pretty dramatic statement. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, first I'm sorry, I should have read Rashi's ba'avidit tarid, liba amalachto, his heart is focused on his malacha, v'shocheach hayirhar, and you forget about inappropriate thoughts. Look at that. When your heart is ultimately, again, when your heart is on your malacha, when your heart is on your work, when you're focused on your growth, when you're focused on who and what you want to be, you forget all about here. Okay, next Rashi, prana b'shita, liros mibachotz ki behema, alma mechatech mamishu. So again, the Malach HaMavis is interesting, right? So ultimately, again, so first of all, it's fascinating that the father of Shlomo is having a conversation with Malach HaMavis. Malach HaMavis says, if it was up to me when I took a person's life, I would rip their throat open like shchita. So obviously what that sounds like over here is that the Malach HaMavis does split the throat. He just doesn't split it as big as one would do with shchita. So it sounds like it's not the poison that kills, but rather, again, it's the splitting of the throat. To which the Gemara says, I'm sorry. Maybe it's that tipa, that drop of poison that actually cuts the esophagus and the windpipe from within. That cuts like the base of shchita. Okay? So furthermore, again, it's that drop of poison that causes the body to turn putrid. This person, Rabbi Chanina bar Kahana, Rabbi Chanina bar Kahana, Amri Beirav, Harotze shelo yasriach meso yapcheno al panav. Ultimately, again, if one wants that the body should not decompose, ultimately, again, turn the body on its face. That way, again, because apparently if the poison gets into the body, ultimately that causes decomposition. If one wants to slow decomposition, turn the body on its face. This way the poison does not enter the totality of the body. All right, so we'll stop over here for today. Shkayach, everyone. Don't worry, tomorrow is a very short Amud Beis. Incredible, ridiculous, and overwhelming Gemara tomorrow. Right, Pinchas ben Yair, tremendous Gemara and Sogis Elas Rabosai. Such a zechus to be able to learn with all of you. Wishing everyone a wonderful day.